Hi everyone, this is Eric Burkholder with Burkholder Wealth Management. We're less than a week away from the U.S. presidential election, and there's a lot of nervousness and uncertainty out there concerning investments in the stock market. And so we want to post this quick video to give you 3 pieces of key information to keep in mind as you invest next week and going forward the rest of the year. Number 1, and most importantly, the U.S. presidential election has no predictive power on the stock market. We've written about this. We'll link to it in the comments. Many other people have written about this, and there's just no evidence that what happens next week in any way can predict how the market will react. And so making any decision based on what will happen next week, no matter how nervous we are about what's going to happen, would be a smart decision. We have to make our decisions based on long-term investment principles, and what happens next week just has no bearing on how the market will behave. I won't spend any more time on this because we've talked about it extensively. I will link to more articles, but that is number 1 most important. The presidential election has no predictive power on what will happen in the market going forward. Number 2, missing out on the best days of the market is much more harmful to your long-term success than avoiding the downturn. Let me say that again. Missing out on the best days of the stock market is much more harmful than avoiding the downturns. That seems counterintuitive. People are always concerned, maybe I should get out now, let's take some money off the table. But a downturn is temporary. We recover. There are many upturns or growth periods that we have never retraced those levels. If you miss a 10% upswing in the market, that may be gone forever. You could have permanently cost yourself a 10% return on your investments. Whereas a downturn, as long as we are in a position to be able to ride it out, and that's based on planning and your risk profile, you will recover from a downturn. Those hypothetical losses are not permanent. Missing out on the upside can be permanent losses. And these gains come in very quick spells. 2016 is a perfect example of the market reacting very unexpectedly and in a large move in the opposite direction of what people thought. When Trump won the election in 2016, some markets, small value specifically, gained 24% over the next month after the election. If anyone on either side had gotten out in preparation of what may have happened during that election, you would have potentially lost out permanently on a 24% increase in small value. There are many different markets, obviously, and they all may react differently to the election. But at the end of the day, we want to stay invested. The positive long-term rates of return to the market go to those who stay invested. If you get out, in and out, ultimately you're much more likely to get a low rate of return by missing the big days than avoiding the down days. I'll show you a slide here in just a second, and this shows you just how costly missing those good days can be. And so point number 2, stay invested. Don't get out and cost yourself a lot of money because you're out of the market when you missed a big gain. Point number 3, it may seem like this is unprecedented times, and some of it is. All time is unprecedented in some ways. The saying is that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And if everyone will recall, in 2000, we actually had a contested election, and it was over a month before we knew who won between Bush and Gore. The market was actually roughly flat during this time. And so the thought of just because we might not know who wins the presidential election by the end of next week ultimately spells disaster for the market is just not true. Similar things have happened, and I would say just like everything, the market tends to do fairly well under a lot of uncertainty. So even if we don't have a president by the end of next week or the week after or a month after that, again, that's not a reason to make a decision on your investments. We don't know for sure if that will tank the market or not. And as we just said in point 2, you're much more likely to miss an upturn by getting out in and out of the market and that's much more detrimental to your long-term performance. In summary, point number one, presidential election has no predictive power on the market. As much as you want it to, or as much as it feels like it will, it does not. So do not make decisions based on what you think will happen next week. Point number two, missing out on big gains is much more costly than avoiding downturns. You want to stay invested. Big gains come at the most unexpected times. Those who can withstand the uncertainty of the market ultimately are the winners. If you're getting out, you're very likely to miss the big gains in the market and lock in a low rate of return long term. And number three, even though this is unprecedented election with unprecedented mail-in ballots and early voting, things like a contested election have happened before. It may be a week or two or a month before we know who the president is, but that is not a reason to get out of the market. If anything, based on what little evidence we have, the market may be fairly flat while we figure out who the president is. There's no reason to get out and create undue risk and anxiety for something we don't even know will happen. So hopefully these 3 points help you, can get you through next week and going forward. And as always, if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to ask us or your advisor. We're happy to help you talk through these things and help you to make good long-term decisions. Thanks, and everyone go vote next week.